I would hate to see them suffer as they struggle to gain the audience's attention. You know, nobody wants to suffer through that. But of course, the courtyard out back is available as always. In any event, our next speaker needs no introduction. You all know him as the leader of Germany from 1933 to 1945. Real old heads will remember our next speaker. He's a self-described writer, speaker, prophet, seer, revelator, gigolo, assassin, and empath. And he is one of the preeminent sex symbols of the early alt-right. Please give it up for Andy Nowicki.
Thank you. Very nice introduction. Without being cheeky, I don't suppose there's no real ventilation issue. There's no chance for ventilation down here? Okay, understood. Well, what I'm about to read you, the passage I'm about to read from is a story. It's a book that I wrote called Under the Nihil. And it's a story about a deranged, alienated man who ends up going to New York City to commit a terrorist act. And now, here I am in New York City, relaying his words. I love it when art imitates life, and vice versa. Under the Nihil. Of course, I wasn't immune to the temptations that persist in our age, even amongst those who have supposedly thrown off the shackles of conformity and freely chosen to commit to the free fall. In fact, I wasn't really free yet, because I did two stupid things, typical of a modern-day would-be badass nihilist poseur. Number one, I saw a therapist. Number two, I kept a blog. In fact, a large part of what I wrote about in my blog concerned my therapy, which shows you just how far away I truly was from salvation. I only had one foot in the swirling void. The other foot, still hopeful, strode out of its own accord, seeking solid ground, while both of my arms stretched, or rather flailed, towards the heavens, apparently expecting some assistance to arrive from that region. Yes, I was double-minded, inconstant, not yet set on my proper path. I still wanted to return to my thought-to-be vocation, rather than faithfully tread the course of my destiny. It's a pitiful thing to recall, but I must do, since my purpose here is not just to discuss what I have become, with your inestimable help, Mr. X, but also what I used to be just a short time ago. Here, then, are a few excerpts from my ridiculous blog, which I kept during the months of my self-imposed prison, prior to my glorious recent emergence into blissful sunlight. August 26. Current mood, dubious. Discussed anger with the shrink today. Talked about the strange, self-fulfilling prophecy involved when people accuse you of being angry. It makes you angry even when you weren't angry before you were assailed with their accusations. How do I deal with all of this rage? I've tried to pray it away, but to no avail. It remains, persists, growls inside me like a hungry beast that hasn't been fed. Why am I angry? Doc wanted to know. I told him about my childhood, blah, blah, blah. The runt of the litter, treated as if I weren't there, a mere afterthought after birth, feeling of apartness, the skull beneath the skin, chaos, disorder, everything in doubt, looking for God from youth onward. One day, after a fight with my brothers, I flee sulkily to another room, open a Bible, cast about for inspiration, take up and read, as St. Augustine had instructed. But a rude interruption. No enlightenment. My dad walks in, discovers me with my good book. He frowns, scolds me. The Bible's not something you escape to. The shame that accompanies this rebuke but also the conception of an idea. I can flee the disappointing muck of this inconstant world. I can run to God. I read more of my Bible. It's a family antique with golden page ends and a wonderfully savory old book smell. I save up my allowance money, purchase more rosary beads, start to attend Mass regularly. My parents are fallen away Catholics, but my sister, the eldest of my siblings, wants to be a nun. She's falling back to the church instead of away from it. One can fall in both directions. Gravity often reverses from generation to generation. I decide I'm going to be a priest. The lovely sense of calm that accompanies this thought. I have a calling instead of just a falling. But, nothing seems to change. I want it all to coalesce, to fall into place, but no such luck. Now that I've declared my calling, in fact, I feel more lonely, more isolated, more doubtfully dubious than I'd ever felt previously. I bring my rosary beads to school, and the kids start to call me Bead Boy. They rough me up, tease me, taunt me, smirk and snicker. In their adolescent's absence of cleverness, they seize upon various variations of the Bead Boy appellation, which of course leads ineluctably to Peed Boy. Such retards they are. Yet they are many and I am one. Alone, apart, just like ever. How to respond to this? My dad says just to play along with the joke, to make fun of myself even as they're making fun of me. This will take the sting out of their mockery, he insists. But I try, and it doesn't. In fact, they step the jibes up a notch. They think it's pretty gay of me to try to diffuse their fun in such a manner. My dad was popular when he was a kid. Most of my brothers were cool, but they're all much older. They're all too much older for their cred to rub off on me. My mom doesn't know what to do with me. I am an object of concern, sad and serious all the time. Where did she go wrong? Why am I not better adjusted like all of my siblings? Why so depressed, angry, moody, sulky? I was such a happy little boy. She remembers. What happened? My dad, meantime, has had just about enough. It's a case of a self-fulfilling prophecy, he lectures me solemnly. You expect the worst of people, then that's all you'll get. I hear my parents talking one night while they think I'm asleep. My dad is fed up. I just told him that I thought his beloved older brother, my uncle, was an annoying phony. He always asks me vague, general questions about how I'm doing, and he has absolutely no interest in my actual answers. He's an insincere cheeseball, a backslapping, jackass salesman type. Your kind of fellow, Mr. X. But to my dad, he's the essence of a nice, friendly guy, healthily extroverted, at peace with humanity, a people person, in fact, the salt of the ever-loving earth. He's someone, in fact, that I could really stand to emulate just a little bit instead of keeping up the tiresome, gloomy, cynical, slouchy, sullen teenager routine. This latest clash of sensibilities, in which I revealed my irritation with my dad's wonderful older brother, whom he secretly despises as much as I do, but to whom he feels a strangely fierce allegiance, as of an underling to a commanding officer during wartime. This has simply left him chafed, frosted, at the end of his tether with me, the runt of the litter of his loins. In fact, he even cussed me out. Aren't sons supposed to cuss out their fathers, not vice versa? How upside down our world has become. Who the fuck cares what you think? He rhetorically asked me, jabbing his finger into my chest before storming out of the room. So now I lie in bed, unsleeping, my mind embroiled in turmoil, my fingers working my rosary beads, trying desperately to sort order from chaos, to summon tranquility of soul from the toil and trouble inherent in this mortal coil, calling on Holy Mary, Mother of God, and all of the saints for guidance and assistance. and I hear my own mother whispering to my father in the room across the hall, "I think there's something wrong with him. Something we should find out about before it's too late." She lays emphasis on certain words and phrases with a particular urgency, with staccato exactitude. My father grunts dismissively. "I don't want to go to talk to some asshole about it," he mutters, his tone somehow between frustrated contempt and tired resignation. "He needs to work it out. I've tried and I really can't help him anymore." My mother says nothing, but I feel her anxious energy reverberating across the distance of the house. I attempt to put her disappointed-looking face, filled with consternation and fear, out of mind, picturing instead the calm, kind, compassionate countenance of my mother in heaven. "Hail, Holy Queen, carry me away like a swaddling child, away from this wreck of a family, from this bitch of a world." September 24th, current mood, numb, despondent. Today, me and Shrinko talked about my eldest sister, the nun in training, fellow rebel against my lapsed Catholicism of my parents. I say fellow rebel, but the truth is she's never viewed herself as a rebel or myself as her fellow. To her, I'm a sort of negligible tag-along, tail perpetually between his legs, accompanying her to Mass, Eucharistic adoration, and confession. Her faith to me is an indecipherable riddle, a secret she will not share. She sighs like an exasperated schoolmarm and speaks imperiously, telling me that when kids at school are mean to me, I should take it as a compliment. My link with the martyrs, who were persecuted for their adherence to the faith. In fact, she pontificates, sounding a bit like our Father, on earth, not in heaven. The one in heaven doesn't talk to me at all. I should feel humbled by the fact that my suffering is so infinitely less arduous than those of the great saints through history. My trials are, in fact, so minimal as barely to qualify as trials at all. I should offer them up to the Lord and be mindful of how good I have it, she instructs. I agree that my suffering doesn't compare to those of the holy martyrs, but I ask, just the same, when will God grant me comfort? When will he strengthen my faith? I tell my sister, who plans to be a sister, to pray for me. And she says she will, her face set in a flinty expression of stern-eyed condescension. To her, I'm like a promising pupil who keeps letting her down, but one she won't give up on because the Lord would never tolerate defeatism. Aye, a project, a lost cause, but with God, all things are possible. My sister lowers her eyes in prayer next to the statue of the Holy Mother, the lady's arms graciously extended to welcome sinners back into the fold, now and at the hour of their deaths. Kneeling next to my sister, I steal a furtive glance in her direction, wondering if she's putting in a word for me at that moment, or if she's currently asking for help for all the starving children in Africa and Indonesia, or the lost souls on death row, or the babies in danger of being aborted. Her face is perfectly impassive. If she notices me noticing her, she doesn't show it. I turn my attention back to the rosary beads lying dormant across my fingertips. I try to pray, but my mind is suddenly filled with the refrain I've heard so often at school. Bead boy, peed boy, bead boy, peed boy. Curiously, I find myself stifling a chuckle at this recollection of my ever-present humiliation. September 26th. Dr. Shrinky Dink seems to think I'm angry because I perceive myself as not being properly respected or supported. He thinks I'm depressed for much the same reason. Rage and sadness, fighting mightily for possession of my soul. Who's good and who's evil? Or are they both demons, both to be expelled? Doc says he'd like to get me started on antidepressants. That'll cut off one of the heads of the two-headed beast, maybe, if it works. But do I want it to work? Would I be happy being happy? October 24th, birthday today, 25 years old. Midway through my 20s, sliding into obscurity. No motivation, none whatever to get back on my horse. No thanks. I think I'll just lie here, gaze up at the stars. Mom calls to wish me happy day. She leaves a concerned-sounding message on the voicemail, and her tone of voice brings my gorge to a rise. I'm practically retching at the sound of it. Shaking with apoplexy, tired of being pitied, of being talked down to. I push the button, erase the message. It's gone and I'm done. October 29th, robbed today. I almost feel bad for the criminals who broke in. I've got so little anyone would want to steal. They took my TV and DVD player, good for them. Had my laptop with me while I was out though, so it's still here for me to type upon to my heart's content. They broke my lock, and I have no desire to have it replaced. If anyone else decides to re-invade and have their way with my person, then I'm fine with that. Whatever happens to me is evidently God's will. I am in the hands of the all-knowing yet utterly indifferent, perhaps even malevolent cosmos. Come what will, I won't resist. I'll take it as my cue. Every dog has his day, and I'm a dog, if little else, a dog and no man, fit to be kicked. November 7th. Mr. Know-it-all shrink wrap thinks he's got me all figured out. What he doesn't know is that there's more to me than meets his bemused, bespectacled gaze. He sees me as your classic case angry malcontent, a young man with issues due to parental conflict and sibling rivalry. My pitiful little childhood and adolescent traumas predictably stretched out before him as he makes notations, thoughtfully checking off box after box in his mind's eye, figuring me to be a textbook example of something or other. I'm not sure what, nor do I care. It doesn't matter. Nothing does. Or does it? I can't sink much lower, yet somehow I'm unable to rescue myself from having hope for the future. But hope is death. What I need is to cut out that cancer. Can you help me with that, Dr. Pepper? Are you a surgeon too? You'd make a whole lot more money if you were. Of course you can't help. You're in the business of hope. Hope and happiness and all that malignant nonsense. I used to be like you. Believe it or not, I was cut out for the priesthood. I always had compassion on the weak, the angry, the helpless, the wretched. How could I not? We are each other. I recall visiting an old woman's house once, visiting an old woman once in a nursing home as part of a seminary's pastoral care training. She told me about her husband, long dead, and how he suffered a nervous breakdown when he was a young man, at the age of 33, the same age, she helpfully reminded me, as Jesus when he was crucified. Her husband's body wasn't broken or pierced with nails, but his mind was nailed to its own cross, scourged mercilessly, and left for dead. Her husband had been a genius, she told me, and all seemed to be going well for him. He'd been promoted to a prominent post in his field. He was a statistical engineer, being a man of keen intellect, when suddenly his father died of a heart attack. It had been a real shock, to say the least, this old lady told me, her eyes squeezing shut with mental trauma from the memory, which in turn caused her gnarled face to wrinkle sadly. No one saw it coming. The man had always appeared to be in superb, robust health and hadn't even hit 60 yet. Her husband felt so shaken by a sudden and seemingly senseless loss of his father that he stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and never left the house, within which he paced restlessly about in his pajamas for weeks, raging and fulminating against the Almighty in frightening language, which left the woman and their 2 small children terrified and befuddled. The man was unable to return to his job and soon lost his position. Eventually, it became necessary to take him to an institution for an extended period of time. Though his condition eventually improved, he was never the same afterwards. "What a fool I was," he cryptically exclaimed to her later, after he emerged, a gaunt and pallorous corpse of a man. "What a fool, what a fool, what a fool." She didn't know what he meant, and this just exasperated him further. "What do I mean? What do I mean? I never had any business being sane. No, no. From now on, I'll just be crazy." This rant sounded very Dostoevskian, though I didn't tell her so, figuring she probably wouldn't know who Dostoevsky was. And it intrigued me greatly. She sensed my interest and empathy, even though I never assumed that nauseatingly treacly tone of voice you often hear from spiritual advisors and counselors when they talk to someone, quote, in need. I don't talk to people this way because when you truly discern an equality of kinship with another person, you don't presume to lecture him any more than a fellow inmate in an asylum could rightly take a superior tone of voice with the fellow lunatics who share his cell. We are all crazy, or we should be, even if we aren't. Though I was resolutely undemonstrative, this old woman opened up to me, and when it came time for me to leave, she took my hand, and her ancient eyes shone with earnest thankfulness, a look that touched me greatly. I saw her a few more times before she died, and once she revealed to me, point blank, that I reminded her of her husband. She told me that even though I'd never told her anything about myself. I always just asked her questions, so I wondered how she could make such a connection. I was no engineering genius, and I never suffered an emotional collapse triggered by the death of a loved one. I would have chalked this comparison up to sweetly feeble-minded semi-senility, were it not for the fact that this widow was really quite sharp. She knew me, liked me, trusted me, and felt that her dead husband and I were somehow cut from the same stone. What did she think she glimpsed of my soul that led her to make such an assessment? For some reason, I never asked her. Somehow I just took it for granted, as being in some manner self-evident. I could have been a priest and been happy. I could have said the Mass reverently, could have composed and delivered worthwhile sermons, could have lived simply, could have counseled people who were in pain or faced difficult straits. Yet they drummed me out. I didn't make the cut. I was deemed defective. And it's true. I am possessed of many defects. But doesn't one need defect in order to understand and give succor to defective people? And who isn't defective in this life? How could we be otherwise? I could never be properly obsequious. That was my downfall. They wanted me to snort and snivel and jump through their hoops to prove myself worthy of their post-Vatican II norms, and I failed their examination. So it was off to the scrap heap for me. So it goes. We all wind up nothing but scrap in God's great junkyard anyway. That's what it means to be human, all too human. November 17th. Last night, while dozing fitfully, I had a dream that I was an aborted fetus. Now I weep copious tears as I compose these words, thinking about the events of that horrible dream, which indeed defy description, existing only in some realm of pure emotion, one of total icy sadness. I have the sensation that the tears which drop down my face freeze instantly on my cheeks, since I have only momentarily returned from that place of hellish, chilling pain.